Most people believe the defining tragedy of Jacqueline Kennedy's life happened on a sunny afternoon in Dallas. You likely think the story of America's most famous family is strictly about political power, national grief, and the heavy burden of public service. But the true foundation of Jackie's most complicated heartbreak wasn't built in the Oval Office. It was constructed inside her childhood home. If you only focus on the history books, you miss the invisible, lifelong war waged between two sisters. This was a battle orchestrated by the exact person who was supposed to protect them both. By the time you finish reading this, you will see the Kennedy legacy not as a flawless political dynasty, but as a family fractured by a mother who treated affection as a limited resource. Janet Auchincloss did not raise her daughters, Jackie and Lee, to walk side by side as equals. She raised them to actively compete. From the time they were young girls navigating high society, Janet measured every single trait they possessed against each other. Every suitor who knocked on the door, every physical feature, and every social achievement became a quiet, ruthless contest. Janet didn't hide her preference behind closed doors. She leaned entirely into it. She looked at Jackie and saw the ultimate raw material for the elite world she valued. A girl possessing absolute poise, striking beauty, and unbreakable emotional control. So, Janet molded her oldest daughter. She positioned Jackie directly for the brightest spotlight while pushing Lee, the younger sibling, toward the shadowed edges of the family. When a parent creates this exact kind of punishing structure, the damage doesn't magically disappear when the children grow up. It hardens into their permanent reality. Jackie learned exactly how to meet her mother's towering expectations. Lee learned how to survive while constantly being compared to perfection. This massive gap became the lens through which they viewed themselves and each other for the rest of their lives. Jackie followed the blueprint perfectly. She married a charismatic politician, entered a life that perfectly aligned with her mother's grand vision, and eventually became the First Lady of the United States. Her elegant image expanded across the entire globe. Lee certainly didn't vanish. She married into high society herself, becoming a princess, and moved through the exact same wealthy circles. But her path failed to settle into the rock-solid stability Jackie achieved. Lee navigated painful divorces and launched career attempts, ranging from public relations to interior design that never fully took hold. Every single setback Lee endured felt infinitely heavier because it perfectly fit the narrative their mother had already established. Decades later, Janet finally recognized exactly what her brutal system had accomplished. She witnessed the massive, undeniable divide between an iconic First Lady and a sister forever struggling in her wake. So Janet made a shocking choice. She quietly handed Lee an enormous sum of money, roughly $750,000. This wasn't a generous birthday gift. It was direct compensation. It was an attempt to retroactively balance scales that had been tipped for decades. But Janet kept this massive financial payment a total secret. It stayed buried until the 1980s. During that decade, Janet developed Alzheimer's disease, and her tight grip on the family's secrets began to fade. As lawyers and family members managed her complicated estate, the hidden financial records finally surfaced. Jackie discovered the payment not through a heartfelt healing conversation, but by staring coldly at a legal document. A literal price tag placed on a mother's guilt. That single piece of paper proved to Jackie that the entire system she thrived in had actively damaged her sister. That early childhood damage created the perfect toxic environment for rumors to take root and destroy what little trust remained between the sisters. You might assume the biggest scandals in John F. Kennedy's life involved famous Hollywood actresses or political spies. But the most destructive rumor involved the woman sitting at his own family dinner table. A quiet, persistent story claimed that JFK had engaged in a secret affair with Lee Radziwill. It sounds like the ultimate betrayal, a shocking secret that perfectly explains the icy distance that later defined the sisters' relationship. But if you search for the actual proof, the ground completely gives way beneath you. There are absolutely no love letters. There are no secret photographs. There are no verified eyewitnesses who saw anything happen. The entire scandal traces back to a single, deeply bitter man. Michael Canfield was Lee's first husband. Their marriage legally ended in 1959, leaving him angry, divorced, and completely sidelined from power. In the dark aftermath of that split, Canfield spoke to the famous writer Gore Vidal. Vidal was not a neutral journalist. He loved high drama, craved attention, and had a highly complicated relationship with the Kennedy family himself. According to Vidal, Canfield claimed that Lee used to openly boast about sleeping with the president, even claiming the betrayal happened during a trip to the south of France right near Canfield's own room. Vidal didn't actually witness anything. He simply took the venomous words of an angry ex-husband and eagerly fed them to authors and journalists. The rumor spread like a wildfire because it fit flawlessly into the story the public already wanted to believe, that Lee was deeply jealous of Jackie's glamorous public life. When directly asked about the supposed rivalry, Lee publicly dismissed the entire idea, calling it ludicrous. But the truth rarely matters when gossip is this entertaining. John F. Kennedy lived the kind of life that magnetically attracted scandalous stories, and Lee moved in those exact same highly scrutinized circles. The timeline of the alleged affair was conveniently placed somewhere between 1959 and 1961. During this specific window, Lee was trapped in an unhappy second marriage, and Jackie was enduring the blinding, crushing pressure of the White House. The stakes absolutely could not have been higher, making the gossip instantly explosive. Even without a single shred of hard evidence, the story acted like a slow-acting poison. It fundamentally changed how people looked at Lee. It permanently tied her name to Jackie's husband in a way she could never fully escape. It forced Jackie to navigate the horrific humiliation of the world, wondering if her own flesh and blood had crossed the ultimate line. Despite the agonizing whispers, the sisters did not abandon each other when true catastrophe struck. When John F. Kennedy was assassinated in November 1963, Lee was far away in London. She didn't hesitate or wait for a formal invitation. She immediately flew back to be by Jackie's side. In that moment of absolute world-shattering devastation, the bitter rivalry vanished. Jackie's life was violently collapsing in front of a global audience. Lee stepped directly into the wreckage and took decisive action. She quietly found the pills Jackie was using to cope with the trauma and flushed them down the toilet. She left small, steadying notes for her sister to find throughout the house. Lee knew the fragile woman beneath the First Lady title, and she stayed agonizingly close to keep her from completely breaking apart. Even decades later, when their mother Janet fell ill with Alzheimer's disease in the 1980s, the sisters shared the crushing daily burden of caregiving. They showed up together to manage her fading mind and complicated estate. That is the stunning paradox of their entire lives. They could carry deep, bitter jealousy, yet still rely on each other to handle their mother's decline. But the final breaking point between the sisters had nothing to do with Dallas or John F. Kennedy. It had to do with this man who eventually replaced him. Everyone knows Jackie married the Greek shipping billionaire Aristotle Onassis. Most people assume it was a calculated, cold move by a terrified widow looking to build an impenetrable fortress around her children. What they completely misunderstand is that Onassis belonged to Lee first. By the early 1960s, Lee's second marriage was rapidly failing. She desperately needed an escape, and she found it in the arms of Aristotle Onassis. He was bold, endlessly wealthy, and entirely focused on her. Their connection began around 1961 and grew intensely serious. Lee invested her heart completely into this man, genuinely considering divorcing her husband to build an entirely new life with him. Then came the dark days following the 1963 assassination. Jackie didn't just lose a husband, she completely lost her sense of safety. She was a traumatized widow, suddenly responsible for 2 young children in a world that felt incredibly dangerous. Lee watched her sister breaking under the crushing weight of this fresh grief. She knew Jackie desperately needed a lifeline, so Lee made a choice that required staggering personal sacrifice. She offered up her own private sanctuary. Lee invited Jackie to join her and Onassis for a healing cruise on his legendary luxury yacht, the Christina. Lee thought she was bringing a grieving sister into a safe, quiet space far from the flashbulbs. She had absolutely no idea she was handing over her own future. On that massive yacht, Onassis didn't meet the untouchable and perfect First Lady. He met a deeply vulnerable mourning woman up close, and right in front of Lee's eyes, his intense focus completely shifted. The attention he once poured onto Lee transferred directly and undeniably to Jackie. He was drawn to her quiet strength and her tragic aura. Biographers later described his powerful pull toward Jackie as irresistible. Lee was physically trapped on a boat, forced to watch the man she loved fall for her sister. Jackie didn't fiercely push him away. She allowed the connection to take root and grow. After the cruise mercifully ended, Onassis's fixation on Jackie only deepened into something permanent. His own daughter, Christina, later bitterly referred to Jackie as his unfortunate obsession. Lee was entirely pushed to the outside of a relationship she built. The man she had planned to build a life with had suddenly transformed into her sister's ultimate savior. By 1968, Jackie made the monumental decision to marry Onassis, but the exact way she handled the engagement shows exactly how deeply fractured the sisters' bond had become. Jackie didn't pick up the phone to tell Lee the news directly. She held that explosive information back. Lee found out the hardest way imaginable. She was on vacation in Tunisia when the phone rang. It was Onassis on the line. He called to casually ask Lee to come to their upcoming wedding. Lee didn't scream into the receiver. She didn't burn the relationship down in public. She packed her bags and traveled to Onassis's private island, Scorpios, to watch the man she deeply loved put a ring on her sister's finger. Privately, she was completely devastated, later confessing her profound heartbreak to the famous writer Truman Capote. At the wedding ceremony, a moment occurred that captured the entire tragedy. Jackie grabbed Lee's arm. She looked deeply at her sister and delivered 5 chilling words. "I need this, Lee." Jackie was essentially asking for permission after the fact. She needed Onassis's endless money, his private island, and his fierce protection to shield her children from a world that had murdered their father and his brother. Lee looked back at her and replied with heartbreaking grace, "I know you do, and you should have it." Lee didn't stop the marriage, but she never truly recovered from the emotional theft. The dynamic between them changed permanently that exact day. The beautiful act of compassion Lee showed by inviting Jackie onto that yacht mutated into a lifelong wedge between them. Because Jackie never explained her grudges out loud, the public eagerly invented stories to fill the silence. A massive myth grew that Jackie kept a mental enemies list of people who had crossed her. According to the persistent rumor, Lee's name sat right at the top of that secret list. But the reality is much colder than a dramatic hit list. Jackie didn't aggressively track enemies. She simply erased people. She handled severe conflict by quietly moving away and making the icy distance permanent. You see her true, devastating method of dealing with betrayal at the very end of her life. In 1994, Jackie sat down to write her final will. A will isn't just a boring legal document. It is a final, undeniable message to the people you leave behind. It was Jackie's very last opportunity to shape her story and permanently define her boundaries. When she reached the specific section concerning her sister, Jackie made a ruthless, highly calculated decision. She cut Lee out completely. She didn't do it with screaming insults. She did it with terrifying politeness. Jackie wrote that she held great affection for Lee, but she was leaving her absolutely nothing. Jackie justified the total exclusion with a single, devastating sentence. She had already provided for her during my lifetime. Jackie was coldly referring to the loans and financial bailouts she had given Lee during her rocky career shifts and messy divorces. Jackie weaponized her past generosity to slam the door forever. To prove this wasn't simply a matter of running out of money, Jackie set up massive trust funds for Lee's children. She left her niece, Tina, and nephew, Anthony, roughly $500,000 each. She made absolutely sure the world knew she had the cash to give. She just flatly refused to give a single cent to Lee. "I have great affection. I have already provided." Those precise phrases sound kind if you don't know the dark history, but they were expertly designed to create distance. Affection is not deep intimacy. Acknowledging past financial help is a brutal way of saying the debt is officially settled. Jackie didn't leave a single inch of room for confusion or a heartwarming post-mortem reconciliation. After Jackie died in May of 1994, there was no tearful final moment of healing. What had broken on that Mediterranean yacht stayed deeply broken forever. Lee was left behind to carry the heavy weight of a childhood comparison she could never win, a fierce love she sacrificed to save her sister, and a final legal document that told the entire world exactly where she stood.